My father, well, he was, as you point out, a Czechoslovak diplomat. We came to the United States in 1948, and he defected, asked for political asylum, and at that stage, because the communists had taken over in Czechoslovakia, and at that stage the Rockefeller Foundation was funding intellectuals, Central European intellectuals, to go to different universities, and he was chosen to go to the University of Denver. Of course, we had no idea where Denver was, and we ended up there, and then my father ultimately became dean of the Graduate School of International Studies, and I'm very pleased to say that this year they're renaming the school in his honor. And when he died in 1977, he was a pretty big deal by then in Denver, and there were lots of tributes and flowers, and among the various things was a ceramic container in the shape of a piano with some with leaves and flowers and things in it. And I said to my mother, "Where did this come from?" And she said, "It's from your father's favorite student, Condoleezza Rice." So in 1987, when I was working for Michael Dukakis's presidential campaign, my job was to find foreign policy advisors. And so I thought, well, perfect. Here's this woman who's a student of my father's, a Soviet expert teaching on the West Coast at Stanford, and a woman, perfect. So I called her up and I asked her to be an advisor to Dukakis, and she said, "Madeleine, I don't know how to tell you this, but I'm a Republican." And I said, "Condi, how could you be? We had the same father."
So you got your PhD at Columbia after having your three daughters. So while you were raising your three daughters, how did you make that all work?
Well, I kept getting pregnant to get extensions. In our house, we had a lot of, when the kids were growing up, with their father as a journalist, it was kind of constant, "What do you think of this? Why don't you express yourself on this subject? Why don't you do it more clearly?" And I think it was very much of a give and take. And I think it really helped everybody in terms of clarifying thoughts and feeling that you had a voice, that there were avenues. There's great advantage to having a journalistic family because you think you can make that happen. And so I think it was very typical, very typical.
No.
I was pretty little at the time, and I wanted to talk to Mom, and Alice Ann said, "You can't, she's on the floor with Muskie." And I was like, "Why is she on the floor with Muskie?" And that was her boss, and that just didn't really make any sense. Clearly she was on the Senate floor, but that is the kind of life that we grew up with, and sort of the iconography of Washington was infused in our family, and Mom really was on the floor with Senator Muskie at that point.
Well, I remember we were at summer camp, and Mom wrote us a letter and said, "I'm going to be working for Senator Muskie full-time. What do you think?" And I didn't really understand the implication of it because Mom always worked. And so, I was surprised that she was asking us. And our lives really didn't change because, I'm very proud to say that even to this moment, now that I'm the ancient age of 47, that I still feel like, despite the fact that I have a full-time working mom, that we always have her undivided attention when we need it. So I never felt like it changed our lives at all.
Madeleine, when you refer to your time as in Security Council meetings when you were U.S. representative to the United Nations as 14 suits and a skirt, did you find that gender was more of an issue then for you than it was as Secretary of State, or was it complex in both cases?
Complex in both, but what was interesting, I think every woman in this room will probably identify with this, that in meetings, women, at least the ones that I know, and I did this, is you kind of wait to get a feeling of the room, and you decide that you might wait to say something, and you think you have something to say, and then you think it's stupid, and then some man says it, and you're really mad at yourself for not having said it. I had also, as a professor, I had been teaching my students to interrupt. I said that women especially have to learn to interrupt. It does help when you're the United States, however. What happened, though, is I thought that it would be important to get support of other women at the UN. And since, as UN ambassador, I lived at the residence of the UN ambassador is the penthouse of the Waldorf, so that's pretty nice. And it was one of the first times I didn't have to cook lunch myself. So I had asked the women permanent representatives to lunch. My assistant had done that, and I thought I'd get to my residence, there'd be a lot of people there. There were 6 other women there out of 183 countries at the time. So that there were, and the countries were Philippines, Kazakhstan, Canada, Trinidad, Tobago, Jamaica, Liechtenstein, and me. And being an American, I formed a caucus, and we called it the G7, and